Hi everyone. Welcome to my first prediction for the Australian 2022 um, like federal election. Um, so we've got Scott Morrison's Liberal National Coalition seeking a fourth term in office um, against the Labor Party under the leadership of Anthony Albanese. So the last election, this is mainly a video about sort of my opinion on what I think will happen in the election. And this will be backed up by last election data and statistics. So it is still my opinion, and I do consider myself slightly biased in certain aspects, in including some policies and candidates and that sort of thing. But I still try and think about past margins and statistics and likelihoods, so that I see it as still a valid prediction, a one that would probably be put on the as a sort of a election prediction, as there's not many that have been released more than I when it will be in May, so we're still almost 6 months away. But as we move into January and February next year in 2022, we'll probably see some at least some projections being made by some of the major prediction analysts. Okay, so diving into the electorate, diving into the map. I'm mainly going to be talking about this video the lower house, because the lower house is the house that we form government in Australia. The Senate also is very important in governing policy, and the government wants to have a majority in the Senate, and they usually will get their majority. Sometimes they might have like no majority, but they have the majority of, like, they don't have a majority in the chamber, but they have the most seats. So that means you'll be looking at confidence and supply from the crossbench. But we're not going to be talking about the federal Senate, because I'll do that in another video. And it's not based on seats. So if we go over to, I'm using a program called MapChart, and you can see here I've actually done this myself. I've actually coloured in all the electorates, which took me an hour or so. I've coloured in all the electorates, and I've got the legend here, shows us what the margins are. So I've done the Liberal margins. So we've got marginal, lean, likely, and safe. So how I calculate this is that marginal is when a candidate wins a seat by so they win it from 0 to 1%. So they win 50% of the vote exactly, and above to 51%. Because in Australia you have to win a majority. In England, for instance, they do a process called first past the post, which is where it's not a person who gets a majority, but it's a person who gets the most. I personally don't think that's I really like our system in Australia. I think it's both proportional but also majoritarian, which is where we elect strong governments, but it's still sort of fair and representative. But anyway, so yes, you have to get a majority, and then a lean margin is basically a margin from 1% to 5%. A likely margin is 5% to 15%, and a safe margin is 15% and onwards, pretty much. But no one wins a seat by 100%. There are some very high marginals. Like there's some seats. I think this regional seat of Maranoa has a huge margin for the Liberal Party, but there are other seats that. But it's rare for a candidate to be that popular or to not, because to get a seat like that strong of a margin, you almost have to have no candidate you're running against, and that rarely does happen in Australia because we our political participation is a lot stronger because we have mandatory voting. So I've done all the margins for Labor and Liberal because they have a lot of seats, and then I've done Nationals likely and safe because there weren't any national marginal seats. There might be national marginal seats in the upcoming election, and I have flagged a potential for them to be marginal or lean, because the National Party at the moment is very unpopular within the government. The government isn't popular, but it seems to be that the National Party is seen as just sort of this add-on that seems to be causing disruption, and their current leader Barnaby Joyce, who's now the Deputy Prime Minister, is extremely unpopular, and that is reasonable considering that he probably shouldn't be in Parliament due to the numerous numbers of scandals. So his seat of what's his seat? New England could be not as likely as he'd like to be. And then you've got the other parties that have seats. Greens. There are 3 independents. There's the seat of Indy. These are mini maps of these are mini maps of the each like city in each state. So we've got South and North Brisbane up here. That's where they are. Sydney and so sort of CBD, so like the inner city and the outer city are here, and then Melbourne's got their CBD here, Adelaide's got theirs, and Perth and Tasmania has there's Tasmania with, I think, no, that's part of the ASC. Yeah, the Tasmania has Clark, I think. Yeah, that Clark's so there's independent in Clark. I think that's it's Andrew Wilkie's seat with it. That's very safe. There's his seat, Indy, and Warringah. I think there's only 3 independents. There's Katter's Australian Party, Bob Katter, who used to be a national senator. He's got a pretty likely seat up there in North Queensland. There's Centre Alliance, which I believe... Sorry, I'm just looking at it's still Centre Alliance. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia. They have 1 seat. There's also I should mention the redistricting, which is happening in Australia. It happens every 10 years, I think, just like in the US, except our redistricting changes very little on the map. So all we are changing is Western Australia, so they're losing a seat, and Victoria down here is gaining a seat. They're gaining the seat of Hawke. So Hawke's a brand new seat, which I think will go to Labor by a very small margin, but it would go to Liberals if they campaign well. And Liberals have lost a seat in Perth. I think Curtin or Moore, somewhere up there. There was a seat that was lost. Okay, so actually I can tell you what seat that was lost. I've got here Stirling. So the seat of Stirling was lost. So the Liberals have lost a seat, but they could potentially gain it in Victoria if they have campaigning well. So if we go over to Anthony Green's website, there is I like his website because it's a bit more clearer than if we go over here, here's the Australian Electoral Commission tally room. They've got I'm not saying their website is bad or anything. Like, please go and check it out if you want really in-depth sort of data analysis. But it is a little bit less user friendly, I'd say. And so if you just want to be like, who's won, or who, like, what's changing, what happened, go to Anthony Green's website under ABC News. But if you want sort of more in-depth stuff, go there. If you just type in 2019 federal election, all these places will come up. So here are all the seats that changed. Some of the margins are greater. Some of the margins are very small. So basically, to form government, you have to campaign well, and you need to get these 76 seats. And so the LNP won 77 of those seats, but Craig Kelly, now if we go over to Wikipedia, Craig Kelly, who's now part of the United Australia Party, defected from the Liberals, and so now they only just have 76. So all of their seats, they have to win in the upcoming election if they want to form government. Obviously, if they lose a seat, that's a seat to Labor. We could see a hung parliament potentially if they lose just one seat, which is a very likely. I don't see them gaining more than 1 or 2 seats in total. If I personally do believe they will win the next election. I just think National Outlook has, like, the fact that they've handled the COVID pandemic reasonably well. It's not been great, and I do think the Scott Morrison and his government have been sort of loosening the reins and backing away from responsibility. And so all the states have been left up to make up their own minds. And I do think that is an absence of leadership. And I do think that will reflect on the voters. It's not like Scott Morrison was popular and now he's unpopular. He was already unpopular due to the bushfires, 2019 bushfire crisis, the fact that he went away during that, and some other issues. But this lack of responsibility on a federal level will have some repercussions. But I don't think, in my opinion, we'll go into the seats now. How about we go into the seats now? But the Liberals have won, they won 4 seats in total. Technically they won 6, but they lost 2 seats as well. They lost Gilmore to Labor Party Fiona Phillips, which was unusual. I think that was because Warren Mundine was not an incumbent, and so that was probably the only fluke really for the Labor Party. But that was their only gain, so they really needed to gain at least 2 or 3 or 4 of these other seats. The other surprise for the Liberals was Warringah, which honestly, I wasn't super surprised. I think the margin was a bit more than I expected. A 7-point margin like that. That is, if you're on this website, 18-point swing against the Liberals. It's a huge swing. That is a swing that is not good for them. And it probably didn't help that Tony Abbott was very unpopular. He was the Prime Minister. If you didn't know, we had Tony Abbott, and then he won the federal election in 2013 against incumbent Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and the Labor Party, and then he lost the leadership ballot to Malcolm Turnbull, and so then he served on the backbench and was seen as a lot by some as he should have resigned then, and said he hang around and cause trouble, and so then he contributed to Malcolm Turnbull's demise, and then Scott Morrison was elected in as Prime Minister, and in the 2019 election, I think Tony Abbott was seen as doing more harm than good in office, and independent Sally Steggall was seen as a very popular candidate, and she does vote for like 90% of Liberal policies, so so that's how she won that seat, and I do believe she will win that seat again, potentially at just a smaller margin, but she could win if the Liberals don't stick up a candidate. They were going to pre-select Gladys Berejiklian for that seat, but I think they're going to go against that. Wentworth's another seat to talk about. I do think it basically narrowly went back to the government against incumbent MP Karen Phelps. I do think it will stay with Dave Sharma. If he decides not to run, she will definitely win, but I think he's decided to run. So you can see here it was only held by her with a tilt margin. So I do think it will stay in the Liberal hands. So if we look at the maps, I do think some of these national seats, especially Barnaby Joyce's seat. Sorry, if you didn't know, the Nationals only run candidates on a federal level in New South Wales and Victoria. So in the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states, they actually run in rural areas. So the National Party could be seen as more of a nuisance, and voters could potentially see them as not super popular. If we look at the last election, did the Nationals? I'm just scrolling down here. Yeah, so you can see here. Oh no, that's the. Sorry, this is the 2022 election. The 2019 Australian federal election. So Labor did lose a seat overall. Let's see. National. The Nationals, they didn't lose any seats, but they didn't win any more seats. So, was there a swing against them? There was a 10-point, 1 point swing against them. So not a huge swing against them, but still a swing nonetheless. In fact, you can see if there's a swing against you, it means nationally you were less popular. Labor had a swing against them. Greens had a swing, but it wasn't enough to pick up a seat. And Independents had huge swings. So overall, apart from the Liberal National Coalition, which is, if you want to really be specific, it's literally just the Liberals. They vote with the Liberals. Some of them sit in the National Party room, but they're honestly like just the Liberals. That's why I've characterised them on my map chart map as blue. The real caveats to the 2019 election were that the Liberals picked up through Liberal National Party a lot of Queensland seats. Some of those seats, if we go, I think Herbert, a huge 8-point swing. It was very not safe for Labor, but they still won that seat in northern Queensland. Lindsay's in New South Wales. Longman so they won Herbert and Longman. So they won 2 seats, which is still good. And Tasmania. So they won 2 seats in Queensland, which is a bit of a warning sign for the Labor Party because they should have won. At least Longman could have been won. And the other seat was a big blow to them with the likely margin for Liberals. Labor also lost in Tasmania. Now the seat of there's 5 seats including Clark, but that's independent. These 4 seats were all held by Labor, and they lost 2 of them. And Braddon was lost by a lean margin, and Bass was one of the closest seats. Could have gone to either party, but it did end up going to the Liberal. So Labor really needs to, if they are going to win the next election, they need to target Bass, they need to target Braddon, they need to target Herbert, they need to target Longman, and they need to make Gilmore safer and Lindsay more competitive. other than that, I'm not seeing Labor zooming ahead or the coalition zooming ahead at the moment in popularity. And what that means is I'm not going to be even moving seats that are likely, such as sort of McKellar or Robertson, which is almost on the border between lean and likely, as going over to even Labor, because I just don't see them as having a popular message. They also don't seem to be. Their policies are coming out now, and I'm seeing them, but I don't see them resonating with the electorate as well as they should be. And they're coming out slower, and they're coming out. They're not often not a great alternative to the government. I think Albanese and his government and his party are really trying to put different alternatives forward, but I don't see it making a huge difference at a common voter's mind, and I think that will translate to either the status quo or a slight increase for coalition support. So there you have it. So that's that's the main. I will go into some other videos about more in depth talks about independence and other things and that sort of thing in the Senate. As I said, I'd make a video about the Senate, but that's mainly it. Sort of gets you into Australian politics, as I know there aren't too many people. There are a lot of people doing American politics and quite a few people doing English politics, and maybe even people doing New Zealand or whatever, or I don't know, Africa or whatever. That there's not too many people doing Australian politics. If my seat is Barara, so I know a lot more about New South Wales politics, but there are each state and their state elections that we can analyse as well. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you back hopefully soon.